Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Climate Confident Podcast. My name is Tom Raftery, and with me on the show today, I have my special guest, Steve. Steve, welcome to the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Tom. I'm Steve Ferrero, CEO of 3eNano, which is a startup out of the University of Toronto. And we are working on nanotechnology for Windows, which we're going to talk about today.
Great. So the company name is 3eNano. Where does the name come from, Steve?
Well, there's three forms of energy. There's UV light, and then there's visible light, and then there's infrared light. So the company name is founded on the fact that there's three portions of light, or sometimes people could say there's visible light and infrared and then the far infrared. There's different ways that you can say what the energy is, but that's what the E is about, three types of energy.
Oh, fascinating. Fascinating. And what is it you are doing in 3eNano? I know you gave us a quick intro there, but let's go into in a little more detail about Windows.
Right. So I like to start with this basically kind of a question to people relative to insulation values. We know that walls are at our 30 or 40, and sometimes ceilings are at our 60, certainly up in Canada and colder climates. And I like to ask people, the double pane low E argon filled window, which occupies a large area of the building envelope, to skyscrapers, it's some 90% window to wall ratio. More and more homes want larger and larger windows. So the question is, what is the R value of that opening? And surprisingly, the R value is only 3. And so if I would just describe R value a little bit more, an open window is R0. There's no resistance. R stands for resistance. There's no resistance to the flow of heat. If you had air conditioning running, it's going to go right out the window because it's an R0. There's nothing to stop it. Now, you can put a single pane in and get an R1. You can put a double pane in and get an R2. Now, if you put a fancy coating on it and fill it with argon, you can get an R3. And that's what the industry sells today. And almost everyone who buys a new home today will get an R3 window installed in their building. Now, from a 3eNano point of view, that's a problem. So basically, we're building homes and buildings with very poor insulated value windows. And we want to use our technology and our methodology of getting our nano coatings, which we'll probably get into, onto substrates in order to drive that R value up so that you are now plugging the hole in your building or skinning your building, if you will, with something that has more insulation value. It's something that's not spoken of very much. There's talk about U value, but that gets complicated. Most people don't understand U value, but I can think of, all right, if I put on a jacket, I'm a certain degree of warmth, and I put on a nice fluffy jacket, I will be warmer. Basically, our buildings in the winter are sitting there in the cold without a blanket on it, if you want to think of it in that way. So we're working on trying to bring better windows to the industry by using our technology.
Okay, and so very noble aim. Can you talk to us a little bit about the technology? What is it that you guys have developed that increases that R value in the windows?
Sure. So there's several ways to increase R value. One is to create cavities, and basically, fiberglass insulation works by the fact that the many, many fibers create little air pockets, and that's creating cavities. So we've all heard of double pane windows, triple pane windows, and quad pane windows. And the more layers you can put in that window, the higher the insulation value would be. Now, the other thing you can do is you could put on special coatings onto the windows or onto the materials. And in our case, we have developed a simplified low E coating or solar energy control coating. And the best way to describe it, Tom, is 2 layers of transparent aluminum sandwiching a layer of transparent silver. That's what it is in its simplest form that I can describe it to you. It's nanometers thick. So it's you can't see it. It's highly transparent. There's a sample of it there. So, there is something there. And what we're doing is we're putting these coatings on different substrates. And in particular, we want to bring in polymers into windows. And the reason we want to do that is that glass is heavy. And as you work with glass and you work with more glass, you work with more weight. And the consequence of working with more weight is that now you need more supporting structure. And now that you need more supporting structure, the cost goes up. So if anyone were to Google after this podcast, triple pane windows, you're going to see they're too heavy, they're too thick, and they're too expensive. Well, we want to make them lighter, we want to make them thinner, and we want to make them less expensive. So basically, our mandate of the company is to mitigate the reasons why triple pane windows aren't the standard in the industry as they should be, and probably will be once regulations, kind of force the industry to move in that direction, kind of like what's happening with gasoline to electric cars. It's kind of happening voluntarily, but, there's been a mandate that forced that. It's just the government didn't go there.
Yeah, sure. And the coatings, you said it's a double layer of aluminium surrounding a layer of silver, if I remember correctly from what you said. Very, very thin
Correct.
layers so that they're completely transparent. How does that stop heat entering or leaving a window?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's where you start getting into the nanophotonics, and that's why we're a spin out of the University of Toronto. Dr. Karani, one of the co-founders of the company, we still operate out of his lab. And really what's happening, Tom, is we're messing with, if you will, the relationship between the metal atom ions and the wavelength of light. So you probably remember as a little kid, if you're swinging on a swing, and if you do it just right, you can gain amplitude and you can reach a certain degree of swinging. Now, if you want to slow down, you can kick your legs in the wrong direction and you'll notice that it will begin to stop you. Now, in the case of these transparent layers, what happens is different wavelengths of light are going to interact with the atoms of those particular layers. And because of the resonance that's set up as these wavelengths try to get through the material, the visible light gets through, it can sneak through there, but the higher wavelengths and the heat gets stuck and it actually gets kicked out. And we design it specifically to do that. So it's resonance really is the secret word there, that we resonate, and more importantly, we reflect. So there is really no flat polymer-based reflective material in the marketplace. And I spent 34 years in the acrylic industry.
Okay.
And one of my jobs was to find something that's not absorptive. So the best way to explain absorptive is you can go outside right now, I don't care what time of year, and if there's a tinted window on a car and it's been sitting in the sun for an hour, you can put your hand on that window, and depending on the latitude, you either have to pull it off really quickly or you'll notice that it's extremely warm. And that's
Right.
because the window is absorbing that energy and getting hot. Now, something that absorbs energy wants to get rid of it. It's just, it can't hold on to it. It has to flow to where it's colder. And that's part of what the coatings do as well in the case of, well, let me just continue with the radiation. So when you have an absorptive material like a tinted car window, it will get hot. It will collect all that energy that, in this case, gets absorbed by the material. There isn't resonance going on there. It's just simply sucking it up. And then as the window heats up and heats up and heats up, it dumps that heat, and half of the heat will go out one face and the other half will go out to the outside. And that's why absorptive materials claim to be energy efficient, because they're taking credit for the fact that half of that heat they're collecting and radiating outward. Well, in our case, if we put our coating on the inside, we're going to reflect that heat back outside. And so by that nature of that's what low E coatings do. They stop the heat from inside the building in the winter from just radiating away, and they force it to radiate back into the room, which saves energy. So I didn't mention we are an energy efficiency company. We're on a mission to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Buildings are responsible for 40% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. And part of that reason is that we're spending a lot of energy on heating and cooling. Why? Because we don't have good enough windows that is allowing solar heat in the summer, which you don't want, and it's letting the heat escape in the winter when you want to retain that heat, especially if that comes from oil or natural gas or fossil fuels. So we really need to do something about the global infrastructure. And we also have to fix the fact that today we're still putting a spring jacket on a building that's going to be sitting at, minus 20 for 2 months of the year. So really that's why we want to commercialize this technology, and we want to bring better windows and better window inserts because it's very disruptive to mess with the window, especially on a skyscraper and in your home. It's not a job you do every year. Some people never. So yeah. It's a retractable problem, and we're injecting ourselves into that space.
Nice. Yeah. No, I switched out the windows in our home here 2 years ago now, and it was a big job, I gotta say, and got double glazed windows with, if I remember correctly, a 17 millimeter chamber in the middle of them. And there's to your point, a coating on them to reflect the heat out. But from what you're telling me, it only reflects like 50% of the heat out, whereas your coating would reflect 100% of the heat out. Am I getting that right?
Well, it depends on the coating, but there are glass coatings. And in the case of, say, a low-E triple stack glass coating, it might be 17 to 21 layers thick. And the reason they need such a complicated stack, as it's called, you're stacking up all these little layers to get this resonance to work right, is that they're coating on glass. When you make glass, you have to temper it. You have to heat it and cool it slowly so that it's safe for you to be around. Glass is very dangerous in its raw form off of the glass float lines. And so in order for that coating to survive 600 or 700 C, they need to build a more complicated and special stack. Now, we're going to put our stack on polymers. You don't have to temper polymer. You don't put it through this extra heat step, which of course adds more greenhouse gases through the energy intensiveness of that process, unless you can do it electrically with clean energy, which someday if we come up with, other sources of heat, that'll come to be. But for today, it's mostly fossil fuels, which we need to get off of. So we said to ourselves, well, if we don't work with glass, then we don't have to temper. If we don't have to temper, we can make a more simplified stack. And so it's kind of synergistic how everything works together in order to reach the same endpoint in a different way.
Okay. And so I can see how that would be great for new builds, but for the current building stock that's there, can they be retrofitted with the technology that you are going to be producing?
Yes. So that is another tremendous opportunity because, the average R value around the planet is 1.7. So that means the whole planet is below the double pane, regular double pane, no coatings. So there's a lot of retrofits that need to happen. And in the case of a retrofit, you don't really want to be handling large single sheets of glass and figuring out, well, how do I get that into the window open safely? And the fact that it's not, surrounded in a protective frame and of the right thickness. So in our case, this is another place where the polymer comes into play, that a lightweight, non-breakable polymer is an attractive material to use to turn a single into a double, if you will. It wouldn't have argon in it, but, we also could have a double pane polymer insert that gets a single pane to a triple. And if they have a double, which we already say is still not good enough, you can get the R value up on a retrofit basis, because it is very disruptive to do anything with a window. You have to tear everything out and things have to fit properly, and it's just disruptive. There's no way around it other than if you can just plug it, which is kind of our solution. But you don't want to give up transparency. You don't want to give up functionality. You want the natural light. You want to see through it. I go down to Florida. You can't see through in all the windows. They're all dark and tinted, and it's an effort to trap and stop that heat, because there is too much heat down there. You're cooking the building. But to that effect, the more heat you can keep out of the building, the more comfortable you'll be. If you're more comfortable, you will use less energy. And we're working with one partner that has a insert product with a nice fitting frame, and you can model just from the physics of what's going to happen to the energy usage of the building. And what they found was there's a curious effect that they always outperform the model when they actually do it. And what they concluded is that, people mess with the thermostat when they're either too hot or too cold. Now, if they're comfortable, they're not likely to walk over to the thermostat and do anything. So we think the theory is that you're just more comfortable, and because you're more comfortable, you don't mess with the thermostat. And because you don't mess with the thermostat, you consume less energy. You're willing to let it sit, at that state.
Nice. Fascinating. And so you said you're working with partners. So it seems to me that you are either not going into full-scale production yourselves, or you are doing limited production and letting partners do most of the production on your behalf, licensing the technology to them or something like that. Is it something along those lines?
Yeah, actually, we're TRL6. So what I'd like to say is that the company was founded in 2015, but funded in 2018. And with the 2018 funding, part of which came from Sustainable Development Technology Canada, which funds startups working on greenhouse gas reductions, we were able to learn how to work with the coatings and scale them up. And so we just recently closed a $4 million Series seed round, and we got a second follow-on grant from SDTC Canada for 5 million Canadian. And now over the next 3 years, we're going to get out of the lab. We're going to get from TRL 6 and 7 where we are to commercialize. And then in our Series A, Tom, we're going to buy our own equipment to bring manufacturing, under our own belt so that we can control what we make and for home and what products we sell. So we're in that transition from lab to commercial. And at the moment, we do have to use other partners around the world that already have the equipment to put these coatings, like this one here was made in Europe.
Okay. And so long term, it's the plan is to do it all yourselves and not outsource any of the production.
Correct. Eventually, yeah. I mean, that's the natural progression. Now, we're not doing what Tesla did and just start right off, from with your own factory. But we're kind of doing the same thing. There were cars out there. They have 4 wheels and a steering wheel, and they get you from A to B, and they have a new way of doing it. But the vertical integration and the starting with a new starting point, the battery created the concept of the new way of doing it. And in our case, it's the coating on polymer is our battery. And eventually we will vertically integrate as well, because what's happening over there in the EV space is that they want to pass on all of the savings of the development and the going down the cost curve to the customer. And we want to do that same thing. We want to give you, Tom, the choice of an R3, let's say at $40 a square foot, or an R8 at $40 a square foot. We want you to pay the same. And we want you to make that choice to get the higher R value window, because you won't mess with the thermostat and you will use less energy. And really, for net zero, if we want buildings to be net zero, you've got to have a double-digit R value on the window skin. Or your other option is to take the windows away and make them smaller. And there are people talking about that, having no windows in the building. Well, that's how we'll solve the problem. But we are humans, and there's something about seeing nature, about seeing the outside, about being connected to the outside world that absolutely has proof on productivity, on health. They find children have higher scores when they're under natural light. And this is all, you can just, lots of studies on the need for humans to see light, and there's a circadian rhythm that the color temperature of the sky, we're just connected to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm originally from Ireland, but I now live in the south of Spain. And yeah, I could never move back to Ireland because the color of the sky in Ireland is grey, 90,
Yeah.
95% of the time during daylight. Whereas here it's blue. It's blue sky 90, 95% of the time. So, I'm just so used to that now. There's no way I could go back. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Is the effectiveness of your coatings, is it affected at all by, let's say, latitude, as in you're in Canada, I'm in Seville? Does that make a difference? Would it be more effective here in Seville than in Canada, or more effective in Canada, or is it just the same?
Yeah, what we would do, Tom, is we would tune it. We would tune it for the latitude that you're in. And there are international building code climate zones. So Canada is 6, 7, 8, and way up is 9, northern Finland. And what all that is a recognition of the fact of the amount of energy that's coming in by latitude, because it is different. And, you get down to Florida, Florida's climate zone 1. And in that case, you just simply have more irradiance per unit area. And we will tune the coating to have a higher demand to kick out that heat and drive more of that heat out through the coating. But you wouldn't want to put a Miami coating in a northern building, and you wouldn't want to put a northern coating in a southern building.
Ah, makes sense. My question wasn't as stupid as I thought, so it seems.
Oh, no, there's just a lot of science behind it. And really, it comes down to the irradiance that's coming in. It's amazing. We have this thermonuclear reactor sitting out there, and it's pumping out all kinds of energy at us, and we need it, but some of it causes problems. And we expect ourselves into controlling it so that it's helpful and healthy for us.
Yeah, great. And let's say that I wanted to apply one of these inserts to these reasonably new windows I've got in my house, and glass door as well. What does that look like? Physically, does it go on the outside? Does it go on the inside? Does it go within the frame? How does that work, just from a practical perspective?
Yeah. The simplest approach is a insert that's fitted for that window, and you could have a soft frame that enables it to sit in with no tools. It just presses in place. And in our case, we would provide the substrate with the appropriate coating for the appropriate climate zone, for the appropriate thing that you're trying to solve, whether you're trying to stop solar heat or whether you're trying to preserve the low E functionality in the winter. And it would fit perfectly, and it would go right in there.
Okay, interesting. And actually, I've just, before I put in the windows, one of the reasons I did was because I noticed that my electricity costs were 6 times higher in winter than in summer. And it's just because the house is poorly insulated, and the daytime temperature in winter here dropped down to about 10 to 15 degrees centigrade. So not very cold, but if you don't have a well-insulated house, if the inside of the house is 15 degrees, you're going to feel it. You're going to want to put on the heat to bring it up to 21, 22 degrees, something kind of more comfortable. So yeah, we have electric heating and solar panels. So the electricity price just goes up and up and up in winter. And it's not that the houses here are built for the summer. So we don't, it gets over 40 degrees here in summer. But because they're kind of more architected for that, there isn't the same requirement to put on the aircon in the summer as there is to put on the heating in the winter. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's all about comfort. And the window insert does make more comfort and the fact that there's a frame around it which seals the air. So air infiltration into windows is regulated, but of course, as things get old and there maybe the caulk isn't so good and the wet wood, if their wood is swollen and there's gaps, and you have that airflow. And when you put in an insert, you will dramatically reduce that influx of cold air, which you don't want in your space. And also, if there's not a low E coating on the window, the radiative energy that you are creating by that heater, electric heat, is radiative heat. You're creating radiative heat. It'll go right through that window without anything to stop it. And that's what our coating does. It says, okay, heat, we want you to go back in the room, and we want Tom's electric bill to stay low.
Nice. And do you have any numbers around how much a household or a building could save in terms of A, money, and B, carbon costs?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you go from a single pane to a double pane, the building will save 20% just in rough numbers. And if you go, say, R1 to R8, that number can go up over 70%. And it also depends on the window size and the wall area. So basically, the thicker and warmer jacket you put on in the winter, the more comfortable you're going to be, and your heart won't have to pump as hard to keep you warm. And it's the same principle. So the savings can be significant. Now, in terms of carbon, of course, really the winter is the more painful problem because we're heating a lot of it with natural gas. So in North America, a lot of oil in the Northeast. Now, in the case where you have electricity and the option to get clean electricity, well, then it's just a matter of you're consuming more than you, I don't want to say should, but you can reduce the amount that you're consuming to take the load off the grid, and especially at those peak periods where people are demanding electricity and for cooling to stay comfortable. And the planet is getting hotter and hotter, as you know. I mean, they've had 40 C in Vancouver. Boston today is the climate of Atlanta 40 years ago. And the buildings weren't built for Atlanta. They were built for Boston, the way it used to be. 85 was a hot day. Now you can have a string of days over 100 in buildings. And, this is where the whole retrofit and you have to upgrade the building because the climate has changed. The building has not. And 50% of the buildings that we have today will still be here in 50 years. So
and we get these big heat waves. Yeah, and we get these big heat waves now happening during summers, which, happened once maybe every 10, 20 years, 30, 40 years ago. Now they're happening every 2-3 years. And you see the figures, the number of people dying in those heat waves can go into the tens of thousands. And presumably something like this would help with something like that.
Correct. No, and we recognize, and that's why we were funded actually by climate tech VCs that see the window space as needing what our tagline is: affordable sustainability. So there's lots of solutions that not everyone can afford. So therefore it doesn't become a mass solution. And in our case, we want to bring the technology on a new platform, polymer, to the glass industry and window manufacturing, and give them another material to work with in order that the higher performing windows will get installed, such that then we can start decarbonizing the existing infrastructure. And also, I hate it when I see a new building getting skinned with double pane windows. It's like learning our lesson. Now, hopefully, Energy Star 7.0 will finally put some meat behind getting rid of the double pane window, which is what will happen if that new standard comes into play. But the industry is kind of happy the way it is now, and we want to disrupt that.
Cool. Steve, we're coming towards the end of the podcast now. Is there any question that I haven't asked that you wish I had, or any aspect of this that we haven't touched on that you think it's important for people to be aware of?
Yeah, maybe one thing was about if you go to Europe, you see very good windows in almost every new apartment and in the hotels. You can actually open the window in a hotel in Europe, and the windows are about, this thick.
Yeah.
So they have better window technology. And the reason they have better window technology is that they have more of a consciousness on the energy efficiency of buildings, because Germany has focused on energy efficiency. They have had moments of 100% renewable energy powering the whole country, so they have a different focus than America. So America needs to bring over that technology, but we also need to not have windows that are this thick. We need to decontent them. We need to take mass out of them, and we need to make them thinner, but not take away the effectiveness. So that might have been one aspect, that, there is pockets of the world where the windows are treated differently, they're manufactured differently, and we want to bring over the good elements of that. Triple pane windows are simply quieter. You'll have less noise. There's less internal mold and condensation, which is good for the building and the health. So maybe that was one aspect. And maybe one other thing that I sometimes mention is that relative to glass, when you melt all the materials that go into glass, and generally they use natural gas to melt all that stuff, even if you could replace the natural gas, let's say with hydrogen as a thermal source, if you take 250 tons of raw materials and melt it, you get out 200 tons of glass, but you also generate 50 tons of CO2 from the liberation of CO2 from the melting process. Now, if someday in the future, companies like 12 and others will capture that CO2, but between now and then, we would like to use polymers and with our nice coating on it.
Okay, great. Steve, that's been fascinating. If people would like to know more about yourself or any of the things we discussed in the podcast today, where would you have me direct them?
Sure. I mean, you can go to 3eNano.com. That's the number 3, the letter E, the word nano.com, all as one word, or send us an email at info@3eNano.com, and we will love to connect with you.
Superb. Steve, that's been great. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
All right, Tom, enjoyed it. Thank you. Okay. Take care.